Hello and welcome to another episode of Crystal Cast, episode number 8. My name is Ross and I'm an immigration lawyer based in Sydney. First and foremost, thank you very much for your ongoing support and for tuning in every week and listening to our podcast. Today we have a number of topics that we're going to be discussing. Remember, if you like the content, please ensure that you click the subscribe button so that you know when the new episode is out. And of course, if you want to be featured on the podcast, or if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to send an email to inquiries@crystalmigration.net. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. In this week's news, there's been a number of announcements made by both the federal and state government. The specific one is in relation to the Victorian invitation rounds. And Victorian invitation rounds were held yesterday, the 19th of October, 2023. There was an alert that went out that stated Victoria's Skilled and Business Migration Program will be conducting an invitation round. If you do not receive any further communication from Victoria today about a client's registration of interest, this means that you have not been invited but remain eligible. Registrations of interest are considered in future selection rounds and no action is required if all information on both on the expression of interest and registration of interest remains to be the same. Now, in relation to other news, we are aware that states are starting to conduct invitation rounds. So therefore, it is important that your clients continue to maintain validity of the documents, which means having a valid skills assessment, having a valid English language test, and making sure that all of the documents specifically relating to employment are available. Now, one of the things that I always talk about in my podcasts and also my CPDs is that when it comes to lodging an expression of interest, for example, it does work a little bit like an honesty system. So what this means is that if you're claiming, say, 8 years of employment experience, you're not required to lodge that experience as part of the expression of interest. However, if you are invited to apply, depending whether it's a state nomination or a standard program, you have 14 or 60 days to provide the documents. Now, 60 days sounds sounds quite reasonable, sounds like a lengthy period of time. But in having said that, if you need to go to the employer and collect those documents, or worse, if those documents aren't available, you won't be able to potentially lodge the application, and you may also impact your chances of receiving future expressions of interest or invitations. Now, I have received a couple of emails this week, or I should say a number of emails this week, in relation to our podcast last week regarding PR announcements. Now, just to bring everyone up to speed, we've mentioned that the government has, or Department of Home Affairs has confirmed that temporary residence transition stream will become available to all occupations irrespective of the stream, and that further announcements are going to be made at the end of October. As of yet, no further announcements have been made. So therefore, if you are lodging an application for a 186 visa under the temporary residence transition stream, the current rules apply, and that is the occupation needs to be on the medium-term list, or transitional arrangements need to apply, otherwise you are not yet eligible. So hopefully by the time that we record our next episode, there will be some substantive news, but as of yet, no further announcements have been made. Now, every week, during every episode, I like to pick a particular topic, what that might be of relevance or something that might cross my mind, or maybe an email that I received or a particular situation that's happened. And this week, I want to discuss about provision of immigration advice. And when is it okay to give free immigration advice? And at what point do you have to say, well, I've given you a little bit of advice here, or I've given you a bit of guidance, and I now want to be charged for my time. Now, what's happened to me this week? There was an inquiry that came through, just like any other inquiry, asking for assistance in relation to a matter. Now, it was I suppose you would call it a scoping call. And when I read what the work entailed, I knew that it wasn't going to be something that you could, finalize quite quickly. And I suppose when it comes to dealing with clients, you've got migration agents, you've got immigration lawyers, and we know that something that might appear to be simple may not necessarily be as simple as it may appear to the client. I've proposed this particular client a consultation. I don't do consultations free of charge. And again, that's a choice. If you want to do them free of charge, you can. There's no requirement for you to do that. But in having said that, when I said to this particular individual that it needs to be a formal consultation, it got to a situation where I was basically asked the same questions, but in different ways. There were texts, there were messages through social media platforms, but essentially asking that very same question, which is this particular individual eligible for a visa? That's what it comes down to. Now, one of the things that I've learned over the years of doing immigration, I've been doing immigration now for 15 years, is saying no. I think saying no is probably the strongest power that we have in terms of being able to control the work that comes in and being able to be in charge of our work. Now, I'm lucky enough to be able to run my own business. I've got an amazing team, but I'm also lucky enough to be able to say, well, if you want me to help you, I need to be engaged and I need to enter into a consultation-like agreement. So with this particular individual, I had to say to them that I can't help you any further and I'm going to cease communication unless you want to engage me. Now, unfortunately, this particular individual didn't take the news well and I haven't heard from them since, but it just goes to show that I do believe that when people ask for free advice and when people ask for something to be done complimentary, whatever you want to call it, the person is aware that this is something that you would ordinarily pay for. And the example that I use during my CPDs is, I wouldn't walk into a supermarket, pack up an entire basket full of groceries and just walk out. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't walk into a shop, get a coat or get a pair of jeans and walk out. So why is it okay? And I'm not saying everyone does it, I just want to be very clear. But why is it okay that some people think that when it comes to professional services, it's okay to feel almost entitled to receive free immigration advice? One of the things that I value a lot is time. I am very time poor, and I have to admit that I get amazed that I find time to do this podcast. For me, this is almost like a therapy session, you could say, to be able to sort of share what's going on in immigration, to share what comes up. But I do value my time, and I don't get a lot of time. For me, it's something that's really precious. So when I get asked to provide free advice, I do push back and I say that if you want me to look into something, I'm happy to do that, but I need to be remunerated for that time. And for me, I've never been interested in money. It's never something that motivated me to do something. And to be honest, I think if it did, it wouldn't have worked for me. But I do not like time to be wasted. What really gets under my skin is when my time is wasted. So with this particular scenario, it just reinforced the power of saying no. But it also made me feel, I suppose, reminded that some people might not necessarily like to hear no. But at the end of the day, saying no to someone, so if they're demanding something off you or if they want something free from you, and you say no to them, that's okay. If this person doesn't speak to you again, if they think that that you should give them that advice for free, that they feel entitled to it, whatever the opinion is, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, this is your business. Whether you're an employee of the practice, whether you run your own practice, you can say no. And it's completely okay to say no, that you don't want to do a particular piece of work or a consultation free of charge. Because at the end of the day, time is something that you don't get back. I was speaking with one of my colleagues earlier. I can't believe it's the end of the week again. You know, time flies by very quick. And for me, time is everything. It's precious, and I would rather spend my time talking to you, the audience, doing what I do or what I love doing, that is immigration, and being valued for the work that I do, as opposed to having people demand, things being done free of charge, and demand being the operative word here. Now, let's talk about refunds. Whether you are an applicant, whether you're an employer, refunds come up in immigration on a number of different occasions. Now, as part of the requirements for nominating an overseas worker, a business is required to pay a nomination training contribution charge, now referred to as SAF levy, or Skilling Australian Fund levy. The SAF levy was established a number of years ago when the 482 visa was introduced, which ensures essentially that foreign workers or the businesses that utilize foreign population pay a contribution towards training Australian staff members. Now, SAF levies has come under a lot of scrutiny, and the reason for that is because, let's say, for example, if you've got employee A transferring from one company to another company, if the first company has paid SAF levy for employee A, the second company would again need to pay SAF levy for that employee. So in a way, it could potentially be seen as double dipping in situations where the visa period overlaps. Now, the other, I suppose, important point is, we're calling it, or the government, I should say, is calling it Skilling Australians Fund levy. So it's there seems to be a lack of transparency in terms of where is this money going. It is, as the name suggests, there to train Australian staff, but who's being trained? What occupations are being trained? So therefore, in this particular segment, what I wanted to discuss is the refund of SAF. So as I mentioned before, SAF is payable on a number of different employer visas. That includes the 482 visa, the 494 visa, and also the 186 visa. SAF levy must be paid by employers whom wish to nominate foreign employees. And whilst SAF levy can also be seen as a disincentive to employ foreign workers, and a levy and other costs associated with sponsoring carry a provision for refunds to be made in certain circumstances. So basically what this means is that in the majority of cases, there will be some provisions that are allowable where SAF levy would be refundable. Now, the specific figure paid by the employee will depend on both the visa subclass and the visa duration and the turnover. So say, for example, if the business is turning over more than $10 million for a 482 visa, it'll be $1,800 per year. For any other business, it would be $1,200 per year. For permanent visas or provisional visas, it's generally a set figure. In certain circumstances, the Department of Home Affairs may, and the emphasis here is on may, issue a full or a partial refund of the levy. And these circumstances include, and they are very limited by the way, situations such as lodging a nomination by mistake. So, for example, let's say you've lodged a nomination and you've selected the wrong occupation. You would be able to withdraw the nomination and seek a full refund. Withdrawal of the nomination due to incorrect stream. So say, for example, you wanted to lodge an application under the temporary residence transition stream, but you've accidentally selected direct entry stream. Withdrawal of the nomination due to incorrect information used to calculate the SAF levy. So say, for example, the business turnover wasn't correctly calculated, the nomination would need to be withdrawn. Failure by the sponsor to become an approved standard business sponsor, either by being refused or by having the application withdrawn, or where the visa is refused due to character, health, or fraud-related grounds. Failure when an employee doesn't commence work. An employee ceasing employment within 1 year of employment. A prospective worker's visa is granted, but they fail to commence work. Now, it's important to note, and this is probably the biggest factor here, is that if the nomination is refused because it doesn't meet a particular regulatory requirement, such as genuine need for the position, or incorrect labour market testing was lodged, or incorrect documentation was lodged, there are no provisions for a SAF refund. And that's what I mean by double dipping, because essentially if an employer wants to relodge the nomination, they would need to pay the SAF levy again. So in certain circumstances, let's say if an employer lodged a nomination, didn't do labour market testing correctly, application refused, the employer would need to relodge a nomination and repay the SAF levy again. So do keep in mind that it is possible to seek a refund in relation to SAF levy. Definitely speak with a migration professional so that they can advise you better. But in most circumstances, if there is a mistake made on the application, it is extremely difficult, or I should say exceptionally difficult, to seek any form of refund or compensation. And now for our guest of the week. Every week I do like to have a particular guest on our podcast, and they all come from all sorts of walks of life. And what better way to have a guest other than to have someone who actually works in an immigration firm, who can give you a bit of a perspective in relation to what happens. Now, we actually just had a bit of a discussion. We thought, should we prepare the questions? And rather than doing that, we're just going to go live. So I've got Yuri Kozak here. Hi, Yuri. How are you?
Hi, Roz. I'm very good. Happy to participate in your podcast.
Perfect. Alrighty. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, as Ross said himself, my name is Yuri. I'm 36 years old. I came to Australia from Brazil in 2018 as a student. I was studying until until December last year. And then finally I got my sponsorship with Crystal Migration. I'm really happy for it.
Excellent. Now, you work in immigration, as in an immigration firm. So, you see a lot of things that happen here. You know that our firm is very dynamic. I think that's a nice way of saying that things can get a little bit sort of, I wouldn't say chaotic, but a lot happens. What would you say would be the most challenging part of your job?
I believe that the most challenging part of my job is dealing with clients, firstly, because when we deal with clients, we have to deal with emotions and we have to meet their expectations as well. Apart from that, I think that's very challenging to be working with deadlines. We have deadlines for everything. So we've got a phone call today, the visas are expiring tomorrow, we have to drop everything just, to provide that service to the client, keep the client happy. I think that's pretty much it. It's all about the deadlines and the managing the stress when dealing with difficult clients and cases.
Yeah, and I think you almost become a psychologist in a way, because I know that an immigration journey is stressful. You want that outcome, so it can be a bit difficult, I suppose. Let's say if your visa is expiring, of course you're going to be stressed and thinking, is it going to be lodged? So it is difficult, but we need to maintain the calmness. Imagine if you and I start to stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Then obviously the client's going to feel it. So how do you deal with stress?
Well, I try to not to stress too much, but sometimes it's impossible. So I basically go to the gym every day. I try to eat healthy as well. Sometimes when I'm really stressed, I just go for a walk. And that's pretty much it. So I value too much the time that I have for myself at home when I am off work. So I try to do things that I would enjoy, so I would be refreshed for the next working day.
Yeah, and that's so important. I have a number of migration agents, contacting me saying I feel like I'm burnt out, and I get it. When you try to do so many things at the same time, you do get burnt out. So it is important. But in terms of your work, what would you say would be your most rewarding part of your job?
I think, let me see. I think when I call a client saying that the visa has been granted, I think that's actually very rewarding. Because as an immigrant myself, I know that it's pretty much a victory once you get a visa, especially PRs. When you get a PR, well, that's such a relief because now you know that the drama is over. But yeah, I think that's very rewarding, and I feel very happy for the clients as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Thank you, Yuri. And we always say, hindsight is a wonderful thing. And you've been working with me now for 4 years. If you could go back in time 4 years from now, what advice would you give to yourself?
Well, I would tell myself to be more confident about myself. Because back then I was not confident at all with my English, even though I could speak the language. I was not confident about how I would perform professionally wise speaking. I Yeah, that's pretty much it. But in terms of immigration, I would recommend myself just to do a better research now that I know the rules and everything, and the visas and the lists and all this. So I would recommend myself to come to Australia in a different visa, not on a student visa, because I felt like I just missed out a couple of opportunities that I could have applied for other more better visas actually. Yeah, that's what I would the advice that I would give to myself.
Well, thank you very much, Yuri. I appreciate your time. And, the best thing about having, these free flowing interviews where there's no script, and there's no questions, there's that level of authenticity. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time as well, and I enjoyed the podcast. I wish I could be invited for more episodes.
Of course you will.
Thank you.
We'll have season 2 next year.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so
Yuri.
much.
Take care. And that is all the time that we have for this week's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in and for supporting us throughout this podcast series. If you like what you're hearing, if you want to be able to get the news delivered to you every Friday, make sure you click that like and subscribe button so that you get alerted as soon as we put out an episode. That's all from me. Have an awesome weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Same place, same time. Take care.